So Ted, I appreciate you joining us. I know you've been in the industry for a long time, and you're so vital to the industry with what you've done over the years. And I really just kind of wanted to ask you, take us back, if you could, to how you got your start in the finishing industry, how it all began for you back then.
Well, I graduated from engineering college in 1967, and I couldn't have been a luckier time to graduate as an engineer and start my first job in the plating industry, which
Hmm.
was at Hanson Van Winkle Munning. They were a longtime manufacturer of rectifiers, buffing equipment, but mostly, and the thing that I was involved in was these very large plating installations
Hmm.
for Detroit automotive shops like Fisher Body, Turnstick Detroit, Saginaw Steering Gear, and so on. Um, they were big machines, and it was really fun to be involved in them as a young engineer. I had hardly started. I think I was on the job for like 3 weeks when they sent me to the plating show in Detroit at Cobalt Hall. Wasn't
Hmm.
called surfing in those days, but it was the same idea as the plating shows we have today, with one difference: we were not yet environmentally aware, and whether you believe it or not, there were actual running plating machines on the
Mm.
convention floor at
Really?
Cobalt
Wow.
Hall. Celrex
Interesting.
would do gold plating of nail clippers as a handout. One of the anodizing manufacturers did keyring memorial things you hung on them that were anodized, blue anodized. So
Interesting.
that plating show was just a fabulous thing. And of course, we couldn't continue doing that after the world changed a little bit after Silent Spring and we became more environmentally aware. You couldn't just install a plating machine in a convention hall and uh, dump the uh, dump the rinse water down the city sewer. So that changed a little bit. Um,
Right.
but other things that were really interesting, as I said, I was so lucky to join at such a good time. Newark branch of AESF, which was maybe the first, maybe the second branch. People still argue whether New York or Newark was first, of course. Um,
Hmm.
we had our own plating school, our own 350-page plating manual. We were taught by really the luminaries of the industry.
Mm.
We'd go out to uh, about a dozen different shops, and we'd see what people were doing in plating as we learned. One of the things I saw that I still remember all this almost 60 years later is I saw barrel plating of chrome. It's always been said you can't barrel plate
Right.
chrome
Right. Hmm.
because of the make and break contact won't work. But millions of Papermate pens had their clips
Mm.
chrome plated in a barrel, and I saw how it was done. It was done in small volume. They had to have 100% inspection. There was a lot of rejects, but they were barrel plated all right.
Right.
Other
Right.
things that were very interesting at that time was, as I said, the machines were huge in those days. I mean, they were
Hmm.
uh, what we call return type machines that would be arranged in sort of an oval shape and almost as long as a football field, some of them in Detroit. But it was
Mm.
also that about that time that program hoist uh, came to start replacing them, which they by now they have mostly done. I was very involved in some of the early program hoists that my company made, so that was a lot of fun.
Mm.
Um, and for me personally, one of the biggest things that was so lucky about the time I joined was that although nobody had computers in those days, except
Hmm.
for the Defense Department, universities, and
Right.
so on, time sharing had just been invented. And what
Mm.
you would do is you would get a teletype machine, and instead of connecting it to the teletype lines, we connected it to a phone line with a modem, and you could run computer programs on a time-shared basis. And it
Wow.
was an early change in the industry where everything before then was hand calculations, and now
Hmm.
we would do our estimating or designs and so on computer on a time-shared basis. So, as I say, it was a fascinating time to be an engineer in this industry as things changed so rapidly.
Right.
After that, I went to Lancy Laboratories, which again was a fascinating time to be there because the U.S. really had no pollution control in those days. Some of the large
Right.
plants on rivers might have had a mediocre attempt to filter out something, but obviously people connected to sewer systems did absolutely nothing
Mm.
until that time, and we're just making that change. But Dr. Lancy had been doing wastewater treatment systems for European manufacturers for decades already. So it really was a hoot. He was a funny guy, and fledgling regulators would try to tell him facts. And of course, he had 30 years of experience knowing what was true and what wasn't true. So it was a great time to be in
Hmm.
that industry.
Right. Yeah.
And after that, I went to Harshaw and became their chief engineer. Designed a lot of plating equipment. Harshaw and M&T, as people may know, became Attotech these days.
Hmm.
So the industry just kept changing, but I was there while a lot of the changes were going on, so it became a lot of fun.
Right. Yeah. It's funny because you mentioned it was a great time to get in the industry, and
It was.
I heard that and I'm thinking, well, why would that be? But I guess it is things. I know the EPA didn't start until what 73 or 70, 72,
Uh,
73, something like
yeah,
that.
just about then.
Yeah. And really the industry was evolving, wasn't it? It was really at that time coming into some real technology that it was using, either equipment or even the philosophy of how to run a shop. I think a lot of it had
Yes.
changed, right,
Hmm.
with that. So interesting stuff. Yeah. And by the way, when you took your job back at your first, coming out of college, had you known much about finishing at all, or
No, I
what?
didn't know anything. My engineering education was uh, totally theoretical. You know,
Mm,
how to do stress and strain calculations and things like that. I had no real world experience, which was why it was so interesting to, immediately go to the plating show and see all of this stuff that our industry was involved in.
right. Yeah.
A lot of fun.
You mentioned. I was going to say you mentioned. Visiting other shops in your job and helping with installations and such. I know you came across a lot of people, uh, uh, again, legends in their own right. Talk about some of those people that really helped shape you as a young engineer getting into the industry and really, setting you on the right path. You mentioned Dr. Lancy, who it's funny, people
Yeah,
know the name, these Lancy wastewater treatment systems, but
right.
they don't know who the guy, this was an actual gentleman who did this. But who were some of the people that really
Yeah.
influenced you in your career?
Some guys who I really loved were Herm Hammer and Herb Tilton, who were really the key to the North branch of the American Electroplating Society. Um, I think anybody today, some people may not recognize those names, but back in the day, there was nobody in the world who didn't know who Herm Hammer and Herb Tilton were, for
Mm-mm.
example. Cy Lamanna is the man who actually wrote or put together our plating manual for the branch, which I told you about. So that was a very uh, interesting guy. Other people who, in my career, were very helpful to me was Joe Mazia. He was, at one time, he was the editor of Metal Finishing Magazine. At other
Mm-hmm.
times, he worked at Frankfurt Arsenal and Parker Chemical Company and so on. But he introduced me to some fascinating projects. He took me on as he was designing the new plating shop for Goddard Space Flight Center, which was an interesting place to design a plating shop for, because they had to be able to do everything and do it right. Actually got a chance to touch the Hubble before it was launched, before they,
Wow.
not the mirrors, I didn't touch the mirrors.
That wasn't you. Wasn't you. Okay, good.
The aluminum framework, they let everybody who visited the shop touch it before, it was sent up into space. So that was an interesting time. He also got me involved in the replating of the Philadelphia William Penn City Hall Tower, which is acres of ironwork up atop the skyline in Philadelphia. So it was a very interesting project. We did tin nickel plating on it. It was also painted, tin zinc plating on it. It was also painted, but the tin zinc plating was supposed to last 100 years. So I guess our grandchildren will find out whether it actually worked or it didn't.
Right.
But that was an interesting project. And Joe was the best man I ever met. He was just such a wonderful soul.
Good.
He had 2 children living in Israel, and he would cry for the Palestinians. He just such a humanitarian.
Gotcha.
An incredible guy. Other people who influenced me was my partner, Tom Palizzi, who started finishing.com with me.
Whoops.
It wouldn't have got off the ground without Tom.
Did you freeze up on me here? Can you hear me still?
He just knew a lot of stuff that I didn't know about not only plating, but human nature and how to get our site going. So he eventually went on to follow his heart and become a inner city high school science teacher. That's what he really wanted to do with his life. But he was a great inspiration to me. One other guy who I remember very well was Donald Wood, the inventor of Wood's nickel plating.
Wood's nickel, yeah.
It is used to activate stainless steel so that you can plate on stainless steel with adhesion. Don also showed me some other stuff, like the cyanide peroxide bombing of gold plating jewelry. He was a very fascinating guy, and I ingratiated myself with him because I lived near a farm stand, and I would bring pumpkin pies when I visited, and that was his favorite thing to eat was pumpkin pie. So yeah, there was a lot of interesting people in my career who got me involved in this thing.
Yeah, Ted, I think a lot of people know you from finishing.com, the website, which has been around for, I want to say, over 38, 39. You started in 1989.
37
right?
years, actually. I started in 1989 as what we called an electronic bulletin board system in those days. We didn't have an internet, of course, but people could use their phone line, use a modem, and connect their computer to my computer, where we had text, where we had problems posted, and people would post a problem, and other people from around the world would use their computers and modems, connect to it, see the problem, and comment on it. So it was an interesting approach. And what we did with it was we started publishing these discussion threads in Metal Finishing Magazine. And actually, we ran that for 10 years, as I heard on the hotline column. And what it made it particularly interesting was that where shop problems before then were all anonymous. For one thing, people didn't say what their problem. They didn't say who they were when they posted their problems. And the other thing was, just one magazine columnist would try to answer the questions. And with this hotline that we had established, you would get input from 5, 10, 20 people
Right.
around the world, and we actually used people's real names. So it was interesting when you read a shop problems column that it wasn't initials of somebody, it was somebody you knew. You know,
Right.
they were describing their problem or they were proposing a solution based on the successes they had in their own shop. So
Right. Yeah.
it was a new thing.
Well, it really built relationships in the industry, I felt, not just here in the US, but all over. I mean, people, and I've heard from people who said, they met somebody on finishing.com, the bulletin board, and they
Mhm.
developed a relationship with them through either emails or phone calls to help them solve problems. It really quickly got issues solved for people. It was very dramatic for a lot of people to get answers that they couldn't find either from their supplier or from their in-house people. So, yeah.
I had a great time doing that. We had so many experts posting there that I'm thankful to. Many of them are already passed away, but it was a very interesting to hear all this stuff. And for me personally, it gave me a chance to investigate whatever I wanted. I mean, there'd be 10, 12 different shop problems posted every day, and I'd pick one that I found interesting. And I could,
Right.
Google it, go through all my textbooks and um, try to answer it. And really, it helped me learn a lot about the industry and a lot about specific plating processes.
Right. Well, I think too, it helped you kind of it helped a lot of people in the industry find out, what were the trending problems, what needed to be solved, right? Because
Yeah.
it wasn't just one shop having the same problem. You'd probably see it at other places, and it really helped.
Right,
I think even the suppliers step up their game and say, "This is something we got to solve for people," because it
right.
really was right. I mean, it seemed to be that. That's what I saw a lot of times on that. I've been a big fan of it. So yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it was leading edge stuff. I mean, we were around when trivalent chrome became the thing. Trivalent chromating became the thing. So obviously there was a lot of early problems with it. People
Right.
did a lot of talking about trivalent processes, whether they were the equal to hexavalent, where they worked, where they didn't work. It was a development that we were kind of tracking in the middle of. It was a lot of fun.
Really? Yeah, and literally you have tens of thousands of questions and answers on there. I mean, if it's and it's amazing you still get questions today.
Yes.
People still looking for things with that. Um, yeah, you're with your career, like you said, you got actively involved early on, with the local chapters and things like that. What advice would you give somebody who's getting into the business and or maybe they're in the business for the last, 4 or 5 or 6 years? What advice would you give them about,
Well,
yeah.
I'd say a couple of things. One, um, I saw your other interviews with the people who've really worked in this industry, like Ray Lucas, Dan
Hmm.
Brockman, and Ray Cabalbo, and they all seem to say the thing to do is to do the hard stuff. Not
Right.
to try commodity plating. Do the hard stuff, and you'll have work. And I think that's what I saw in my travels. I went to a lot of plating shops over the years, as well as having followed these discussions on finishing.com. And I found the same thing. One other little piece of advice I'd offer is that I stepped out of the industry for a short time and worked for the manufacturing technology division of one of the major, well-known uh, consulting organizations that everybody's heard of. And most of the projects we did were, at that time, were on cost reduction.
Mm.
And my advice to anybody is never do a cost reduction program. They never work. What happens
Right.
is you take your eye off of quality, you take your eye off of innovation, uh, you take your eye off of all the things you should be watching as you try to penny pinch. Now,
Right.
if a new technology enthuses you or a new management idea enthuses you, it may well bring cost reductions. Of course, transistors versus vacuum tubes and a million other things that we've seen in our technological age prove all that. But the focus has to be on making better product, not a cheaper product. Trying to make the cheaper product just never ever worked. So I only was with that consulting organization for about a year before I decided it doesn't work. I don't like to do this. I came back to the plating industry and tried to apply what I learned there in the plating industry. There's one other piece of advice I'd offer, not to individuals so much as something that I see the industry doesn't emphasize quite enough, is that metal finishing equals sustainability. Mm-hmm. There's millions of tons of steel and other materials rotting away every day in this world of ours, and it's because it's not properly finished. So easily solvable with proper finishing. And I think we do not convey that to the public. The public understands that their cars last 250,000 miles, not 75,000 miles anymore. They realize that the fenders don't rot out, get cancerous anymore. They last a lifetime. All of this is due to finishing. Proper finishing is what has made all these changes. We are offering sustainability to the world, and I think we really need to publicize that. If we do, and people realize that harassing finishers is penny wise and pound foolish, you're eliminating a pound of phosphate at the cost of remining, resmelting, refabricating, refinishing, repackaging, reselling a ton of steel. It's just foolishness. So I think we should try to get the public on our side by emphasizing that. The public doesn't really understand it's difficult to get 0.1 part per million of some metal in your effluent. They don't really sympathize with you when you complain about it, but they do understand what we're doing for them. So I think we really want to emphasize that. There's things that I think we could take the forefront on. Replacement parts on automobiles have been a problem written about in Consumer Reports and other places for decades. Replacement parts, they're not galvanized like they ought to be. The plated parts aren't plated to the OEM specs. If we take public positions on things like this, the public will like us more, they'll understand us better, and we'll have better finishing. I mean, we don't want to plate replacement parts for cars that are crap. Right, it's better for us. We do a better job if we demand that, no, we're not going to plate them that way. They have to be plated to the original OEM spec. So that's the kind of stuff that I think as an industry, we're not quite there yet in really getting out to the public what our industry does.
Right. I agree with you. Yes, very much. Ted, I want to thank you again for taking time out and again, for all that you've done, like I said, with the finishing.com and everything. We want to thank you for doing that. It was such instrumental. I know when I first got involved in the industry, that was one of my biggest resources, was just to see what was going on. But I want to thank you for joining us and appreciate thank you all for that you've done for the industry.
Okay. I would like to thank you in return, Tim. And besides that, I'd like to say that in addition to the people I mentioned who were my mentors, I'd like to thank the actual platers in this industry, because in a career of almost 60 years doing everything you can imagine, I've never plated a single part. So I know a lot
the irony of that.
Actually doing it.
That's right. Well, again, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Mm-hmm.